This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 99. If you find yourself often overwhelmed and stressed out, I encourage you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/end overwhelm and watch my workshop on the 5 shifts to end overwhelm and live a more balanced and connected life as a highly sensitive woman entrepreneur. Now here is today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. Oh my goodness, I am so excited about this next guest. Today, we are going to be talking all about sisterhood, all about friendships, and I cannot wait to share this with all of you. My guest today is Robin D'Angelo, and she is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of the Wild Grace Collective, which is a community for women to grow, gather, and heal together. Robin also owns the Happy Couple Experts of Orange County group practice, where she and her team specialize in helping frustrated and disconnected couples learn to connect back to themselves and co-create love that's deeply healing and fulfilling. She helps people get out of their own heads and into their bodies to get to the root of what keeps them from feeling stuck, lonely, and unfulfilled in life. Robin's work with women is a fellow traveler to help guide them on their unique journeys to connect to their authentic selves, and that is with a high or a uppercase S, ladies. She uses a unique blend of traditional psychotherapy, neuroscience, plus the power of holding sacred space that heals. She feels most at home and grounded in nature, and if you are ever hiking Southern California, you can probably catch her on a local trail, saying hello to her fellow travelers. Well, Robin, before I say hi to you, I just want to share a little bit with my listeners too that Robin and I share a lot of connections through different Facebook groups and therapy groups together. And I was sharing with Robin before I hit record that she epitomizes to me that she loves love. And so I'm so excited in having you on today, Robin. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
Well, I know we were going to talk about friendships today, but before we dive into that, would you mind a little bit sharing about kind of what got you into becoming a couples therapist and what got you really tuned into creating this new group that you've got going or this new community that you're developing?
Absolutely. So, becoming a couples therapist was not really the plan. I actually started out in corporate America. I was in advertising and marketing for years and ended up, life just kind of threw me a bit of a curveball. And I was kind of plopped into the world of therapy and psychology and said, gosh, this feels really good. This almost feels like home, like I should have been here. But deciding to be a couples therapist as opposed to any other kind of therapist was, you mentioned, loving love. And that is something that as a young woman, I was always kind of teased for by my sisters of, oh gosh, Robin, you always talk about wanting the movie boyfriend, say anything was like my favorite, I just wanted Lloyd Dobler holding that stereo above his head. Like I wanted that guy outside of my room. But I just always loved love. And that really led me to this place of, as an adult, wondering about the disconnect, right, of what we saw in movies growing up, what I saw between the people in my life, the adults, and just experiencing my own relationship dynamics. And I'm like, there's a big gap here. What's the deal? And how can we create more of fulfilling, deeply connected love? Maybe not so much the romanticized, rainbows and butterflies that we see in the movies, but how do we do that in relationship? And, we come together for a reason. How can we stay together and just really feel that fulfilling connection. And then, through my own journey, which I know we'll talk about, I really came to this space of, after working with couples for many years, realizing there's this yearning. There was this deep, deep yearning I was hearing over and over again from the women in the couples that I was working with. And there was also this deep sadness and loneliness and exhaustion. And I just thought, oh my gosh, they're speaking my language. I'm starting to really feel what they're sharing with me. And so over, the last couple years, it's been just a passion of mine to not only take a look at my own journey, but to help other women kind of name that and take a look at what is this? What is this thing that women are sharing with me, and how it's impacting their relationships, not just with their partners, but other women and other people in their lives. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of kind of how that came about.
Well, and it's beautiful that you also tuned into that, and it also resonated with your own soul. It just really tapped into something. And I was sharing with Robin before, again, I hit record, that I have 2 books, Invisible Bonds, Girlfriends, Enduring Ties. And it's by Carmen Berry and Tamara Trader. And I'll put links in the show notes and stuff. And then they did a second book called Girlfriends for Life, Friendships Worth Keeping Forever. And these books touched me back, I think it was when I was in my mid-20s. And we're going to talk about some of these things today, but just one, we know relationships change, right? And at the same time, there's also there's a chapter in the first book that they did. Let me pull it out really quick, just something where I like them even when they're successful. And so there's a quote by Bette Midler in the book: "The worst part of success is to try and find someone who is happy for you." And the stories that they gave in this little chunk of the book, it talks about how those relationships can change as women ourselves, we become more successful. And that could be in your business, that could be in your life. And these things can shift and morph, which can lead to some loneliness.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would like to share just a little bit, Robin, from your perspective, why do you think having other women or sisters in your life is so important to have?
Oh goodness, where to start with that? That is that's like the $1 million question, right? You mentioned this idea of loneliness, and there's some things, I guess I should say, there's many things that us as women go through that our partners simply cannot be the one to support us in the way we need it. Even family members sometimes just can't be that person. And so what happens is we start to kind of isolate emotionally, energetically. We start to put all of our focus on, okay, well, what's my role? How do I show up the best version for these other people so that everyone is happy, so that things are running smoothly? And all of a sudden we become so disconnected from our true selves, as you mentioned. And, as you were introducing me, as I always talk about ourselves with a capital S. And when we get disconnected and get away from ourselves, our life becomes lonely. And so when we have that connection with other women, when we have that sisterhood, I love calling it a sacred sisterhood, when we have that with women who truly understand and connect with us, that loneliness tends to just melt away. We start to feel together. We start to feel connected. We start to feel a part of, which is at our core what all of us deeply yearn for, right? Is this idea and feeling of connection and being a part of.
And I think the other thing with that too, that connection, it's also knowing you're not trying to make your partner or families like the end all be all, right? No. And it's like, I don't have to travel all of these uncharted territories by myself.
For sure. I mean, there's studies of, I read this study one time that showed there was one person standing at the bottom of a hill, and they were told, put on this backpack that weighs 20 pounds, and you're going to have to climb that hill. And they've got them hooked up with all these little things to measure heart rate and stress and cortisol and just all these things of how this person's brain and body responded to this task. And then they did it again, but they brought in someone who they knew and stood them next to them and said, okay, here's your buddy. You guys are going to go up this hill together. Nothing changed other than they brought someone in, and all of the measurements as far as stress, as far as sweat, their heart rate, I mean, everything was lower just because they knew they had someone there to go through it with them. And all it was going up a hill.
Yep.
So imagine when our nervous systems come up against things like, I don't know, a pandemic, maybe getting ready to have a baby, getting ready, like all these things that are these milestone moments. But even just the everyday, day-to-day stressors of being a woman and what that means and the role that you're in, like knowing that you have someone by your side, whether it's virtually or, or in person, it changes the way we experience the entire event. It changes the way we experience stress, and it changes the way we experience this idea of being in connection.
Right. And we both are highly sensitive people. And so we've talked about this just a touch too, that we know as highly sensitive people, Dr. Elaine Aron talks about it, it is so important to be in community with others because we truly get one another on a whole different level that the majority of the world doesn't get. And I think that's another key thing to this is like finding other, not just only the women, but, men too, but those in your life that know they have the highly sensitive traits. They can identify as a highly sensitive person. Connecting with them can make a big difference. So when those big feelings come up, when those tears come up, because you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. They get it. There's no judgment with it. They're like, oh, it is.
Yes.
It really shifts things.
It does. And, I use that example of the study of having to endure something stressful with someone. But you just reminded me that when we have someone else that we can stand shoulder to shoulder with and really take in beauty and pleasure at the same level, at the same depth, I mean, that is a gift unlike anything that we will ever experience as HSPs.
Yeah.
It is such a gift to be able to share in an experience that moves you so deeply. I mean, I'm sure all of us have had that experience where we kind of share a little bit with someone who is a non-HSP, and that response is just not quite the same.
No, it's not. Yeah. And it's the both and the depths of sometimes the despair, the loneliness, the sorrow, and the joys, the bliss that life has to offer. We know it's not the either or, it's the both and that's part of the life journey.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious for you, Robin, would you be open to sharing how you've had some recent changes in your life where your girlfriends really were part of your support system to help you navigate through what you experienced?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. So it started, I can't say it started. I will say the moment when I realized, my goodness, I need my women, was the day I told my partner that I wanted a divorce. And that was a really hard, that was a really hard year. That was a really hard, you name it, month, week, all of that. And so, having someone in my life for 13 years and making that decision of, gosh, our dreams are just getting further and further apart and we're just not aligning anymore. that was when I knew I have to call upon my sisters. I have to call upon the women in my life. And it was interesting because through that experience, I found out the women who I thought would be the women to get me through that actually were not. And so having to deal with the reality of, oh, wow, not all my women can show up for me in the same way. I've got to learn who can and how to share with them and how to ask for help. And so it was a moment in my life where so many things were being reassessed and reevaluated. So not just, the relationship I had had for 13 years, but now my friendships.
Life doesn't work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't. No. I mean, it threw me another curveball. Oh gosh, you're not in support of this. I shared with some women in my life and they just couldn't be supportive. They didn't know how. It was a shock for many women who, decide to exit relationships. I mean, we're not sharing a whole lot of the details with people along the way. So it can be really shocking and unnerving. And I experienced that from some of the women that I thought would be my biggest supporters and cheerleaders. And I had to go, okay, shoot, who are my women? And so it really put me in this place of a new kind of vulnerability of, I had women in my life that I wasn't as close to, or so I thought. And yet I knew just enough about them that I thought, I think I can share this. I think I can get vulnerable and I think I can ask them to be a part of this journey with me. And I have to tell you, Nicole, those were the relationships that ended up being the most supportive and connecting on so many levels beyond just getting a divorce. But it was because I decided to say, I'm going to take a risk here. I don't know if this woman doesn't really know me too well, but I'm going to try it. And so, going through a divorce and being known as the happy couple expert in my field, I mean, there were so many parts of this that were so scary and unknown to me. And yet I had these women that I could call upon and just say, not only do I not know how to do this, I need help. I need help. And I don't even know what I need. I just know I need you to help me. And each one of them were able to kind of just step up and be something that I needed in different ways, again, that I didn't even know that I knew, but I took that leap. I got really vulnerable and I just said, hi, I'm really struggling and can you help me?
Well, and what a beautiful thing. Not that it was easy to go through or not painful to go through, but you deciding, like you said, to take the risk, to take the leap in that vulnerability, to touch base more with these women that were in your circle, but maybe more in the periphery of that circle. And saying, let me see what happens. And they were able to step more in and not try and change you, not try and make the situation different than it is.
No.
But to help guide you and navigate through those moments. And it's fascinating. Again, that's part of what is in the book, that we know, like, at least when I work clinically, when I'm working with teen girls, I talk a lot about grief that happens during those years, because in middle school and high school, it's notorious for friendships changing and shifting, because that's the developmental stage where we go through in life, where we're learning more about ourselves. And we've also got conditions from our family, conditions from our culture, all that sort of stuff that goes on as being a woman. And yet it's like, how do we move through these moments? Like, I thought that was my best friend. I remember an excruciating end of a best friendship back in high school. It was really difficult. And at the same time, it's like, oh, we passed that cross. Like, and you guys can't see, but I'm making a cross with my hands. It's like we crossed paths for those years that we needed to. And then we literally outgrew one another.
Yeah.
And that's with friendships, with love, that can happen, that the intention is you're feeding the relationship. And at the same time, it's like, as much as you feed it, it can still be done.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's recognizing like sometimes people come into your life so you can learn something from them. They need to learn something from you, and then you move forward. And it's these other folks that are on the outside. You're like, well, I'm just going to try this and see what happens. And all of a sudden, this time, because you're getting more clear of who you are and what you're wanting and bringing in your life, now's the time for these people to show up on your path because you're ready for it. They can't show up before that because you're not ready.
No, exactly. And that's the thing is, even if they did show up before that, they would not have been a part of your journey in the way that you'd hoped, right? Like it's that idea of like, we can't force things. And the more that we get to know ourselves and the more we get to honor our own process based on what we're feeling, what we're wanting, what we're realizing, those people can step in and we can just appreciate the heck out of them. Whereas before we just couldn't. We couldn't see maybe, how they truly were meant to be a part of our journey until there we are, smack dab in the middle of it going, all right, where are you?
Exactly.
Where are you?
Well, how do you support women now, whether it's on their own or even in a romantic relationship? How do you support them because again, I hear sometimes, not often, but sometimes I hear, well, Nicole, I don't have a lot of women in my life because, man, they're just often mean. They're kind of catty. They're kind of this. And the whole reason why I created this show is like, let's let go of all these old messages that no longer serve us and come together when we're successful, when we're going through hard things like divorce, when we're going through losses. It's like when we pull together, we actually can move through something. And again, not doing it by ourselves or thinking we even need to do it by ourselves. So what do you tell women when they're like, oh, I remember in middle school, man, I just had some mean girls. And so guys were the thing that I kind of leaned into. And that's what I still do now. How do you help them shift that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously holding kind of that sacred space for women to take a look at, let's look at those relationships. And absolutely, all of us have those experiences. All of us still have some of those experiences.
Yep.
And so what I like to share with women is, there's so much of Brene Brown's work really inspires me. And so, she talks about this idea of it's hard to hate people up close. And so I think about this and I encourage the women I work with and I invite them to own it, to own, I feel rejected by this particular woman, or I feel judged by this particular woman or women, groups of women. And what do I want to do with this? Do I want to move away from that? Or do I want to get bold and get courageous and share with them what it's like to be around them and invite them? Oftentimes when we are the first ones to say, hey, like this is really hard for me, or hey, I'm really looking to connect with other women and I find it hard to do that. How about you? Oftentimes that helps some of those women that have those defenses up to lower those defenses, right? The cattiness, the whatever you're experiencing from a woman or a group of women that feels kind of, I don't know, I call it cold and prickly, like it's edgy a little bit. It's a little hard. I mean, it's there for a reason, which to me says, let's give her a reason to let it go.
Yeah, and oftentimes that cold and prickly stuff is self-protection.
Yeah.
Right? It's things that you might have learned as a young girl, or things that you were taught from your own family of origin of what relationship, quote, should or shouldn't be, where you didn't see a lot of, especially for HSPs. I know so many HSPs experienced you're too sensitive, your emotions were too big. And so then there's this cutoff of like, oh, I just need to conform. I need to kind of shrink down.
Right. And so when I talk about this idea of let's give them a reason to let that go, it's almost like, can you say to that person, like, this is safe to be you? I want to get to know you and all those big feelings. And as long as you're going to hang in there when mine come up too, like it's about just, being human first. And being able to, again, own our stories, own that this has been really hard for me over the years. And we get back to the and I want deeply connected relationships with women. And I know the only way to do that is to really, truly just be myself.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of HSPs, that is being tender. That is being open with our emotions. That is being sensitive. That is not trying to hold back when you are deeply moved by something. And what that does, and what I've seen time and time again, is it creates this bridge to another person. And it closes that gap. Yeah. So when I talk to other women, to answer your question again, is I just encourage them and invite them, be your authentic self, be messy, be human first, show your pain, show your struggles, show your strengths, because those are the things that when you are authentic, when you step into who you really are and you share that, the people that are meant to be on your journey with you will show up. And the ones that are not will find their way out.
So true. It's so fascinating, right? I think, again, my own experience and the women that I've worked with, that pushing to make a relationship work versus allowing it, and to, like you're saying, exploring it, have these sometimes vulnerable, challenging conversations. It's like, wow, there's the flow.
Yeah.
And it is. You might be in this space where like, yeah, this isn't working for either one of us. And so we're going to move forward. And it really does allow other humans to come into your life who've been waiting for this, whether they knew it or you knew it or not.
Exactly. I love that. Yes.
And I think the other thing too is really remembering to forgive the people in your past who have harmed you. Again, so much gets wrapped up to, but I can't forget this. Like, it's not about forgetting. It's energetically cutting the ties of how that's keeping you stuck in the past. And you're not that young girl anymore. You're this adult woman who has the ability to speak up for herself, who has the ability to state what she needs and what's working and what is not.
Right.
And owning that. So that you can allow the healthiest type of people in your life. And there's a give and take in all of it.
Absolutely. And when I think about the women that I work with, whether it's one-on-one or in our gatherings, we talk about this idea of when we hold on so tight to old beliefs, old stories, old hurts, right? You can't see me, but I'm clenching my fists, right? Like we hold on so tight. And we talk about this idea of like, there's no way to receive something when our fists are closed. So how can we start to open up our fists, let go of what we have been clenching onto, so that we can receive the gifts that are showing up every day, truly, and receive that and just be open to that. But it requires us to release what no longer serves us.
And trust.
Those are to trust, right? But those are ideas, those are values, those are the stories, those are, right? It's releasing that which no longer serves us. And sometimes that means dropping that armor that has kept really great women out of our lives, out of fear.
And I think the other thing, when you're talking about that clenching, right? Your hands are like these balls, these fists. When you hold on, again, it's a perceived control. It's a perceived holding on to, because the reality is you don't have any control over anybody else.
No.
But when you hold on so tightly, it's also, I think, underlying that, this is my perception, the fear that you are not enough, the fear that you don't have enough love for not only yourself, but for others. It's like there's a limited quantity. And it's like, that's so not true.
So not true, but it feels terrifying.
Yeah.
To imagine letting something go.
Yeah.
And for so many women that I work with, I will hear things like, I mean, it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, God, like,
breaks
and
my
I've
heart.
been there.
Yeah.
It does. It breaks my heart because I have lived through that. I know exactly that statement. And I find that, sometimes I bump up against that again and again, now and then, with not only, friendships, but with dating and, even business ventures. It's like, well, I mean, it's close, right?
Yeah.
It's okay enough, I guess, right? And I think when we get into this habit of honoring who we are at our cores, what we want, what we desire in life, to have a fulfilling life, to have fulfilling connected relationships, we have to say, gosh, that's just not enough anymore for me.
It's not about settling.
No, I want more, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, I want more, and that's okay. And that is so hard for so many of us to say, because we have been given very different messages along the way.
Well, I think it goes back to as well, like what you're saying in that it's the coming back to, again, what this podcast is about: your soul. It's your true essence. Yeah. It's the unfiltered, the higher connection. It's source, whatever you want to deem that. But when you come back, and you can truly only do that when you get quiet. Yeah. When you get curious and start to explore, like what you've been talking about, like, what are the stories? What are the experiences that I've been through that I'm still thinking is my truth, and it's no longer your truth? Or the messages that I've received, from the culture that I'm saying, oh, well, yeah, to really ask for what you want as a woman makes you selfish. It's kind of like the whole self-care is selfish. It's like, oh my gosh, no, it's not. It's a necessity. Yeah. And it's all of these things. When you bump up against those, when you get curious, when you get gentle with yourself, and it's not judging yourself, all of a sudden things start to fall away. And that, again, we talk about kind of connecting with your intuition, where there's peace when you tap into that, versus when you're trying to push and force something. There's fear, there's anxiety, there's clenching that happens. And it's like, well, okay, there's no more flow.
Right. And it's when we're in that flow that we are most open to receive friendships, receive connections, receive love, right? And so, the work that I do with many of the women I work with is, how can we get you to slow down? And it's so funny, because so many of the women are like, Robin, are you kidding me? I have kids, I have this, I'm running a business. Like, please don't be one more person to tell me to slow down. Yep. And for me, it's shifting our idea of what slowing down means, right? It's slowing down our breathing. It's slowing down the way we move in our kitchen. It's right. So it's like, I'm not asking you to sit and meditate for an hour a day. If you can do that, by all means, sister, right? Make that happen and enjoy it. But really, the slowing down is, how can I call it dropping into our feminine space. How can I really drop into that space, drop out of my working brain, my masculine energy of like plan, go, do, in just moments throughout my day. Yeah. Just moments, right? Because us as women today that are driven and busy and successful and all the words, whatever you want to, we find ourselves getting stuck in that thinking mind space. And there's an energy with that. And that energy really is not conducive to connecting. It's connected to, I call it our GSD energy, or get shit done energy. Like, we are amazing GSDers, us women. We just are. But I will say, unless you're doing a GSD day with your women, which I do with my girlfriends that we're in business with, is we'll do a weekend of GSD, right? We'll go work on our businesses, but we also know when to cut it off, and we go sit outside. Yeah. And we breathe, and we look up at the stars. So it's like, how can we as women really slow down what's happening on the inside and deeply connect to that flow, to that source, whatever you want to call it, like you said, right? Because that's where, I feel like that's where we really truly get to know our purpose, our calling, what we're here to do, what we actually want. So many women I work with are like, when I ask, what would your beautiful life look like? What do you want? And they're just like, oh my God, wait, What I want is
What?
yeah, it doesn't matter what I want. Here's what I
Yeah.
don't want. And here's what and it's like, it's so easy to talk about what we don't want and what doesn't work. But then when we go and we think about, if we want to create this life and these connections, we have to know what that looks like. We have to be able to say, this is what would really fill me up. And so I help women get really clear on, what does pleasure mean to you? What brings you joy? And it's as simple as starting out with your five senses.
Yep.
So many people are like, well, where do you even start? I know exactly what I don't want. It's like, start with your five senses. What are the smells and the tastes and the things that I look at? What are the sensations that I find pleasurable, that bring me joy? And just start there. And how can we bring some of those elements into your everyday life?
Isn't it fascinating, though, how easily, again, our culture, I can only speak to the U.S. because that's where I live. But I know in our culture, it's like the busyness, and I know Brene Brown talks about it too, like the badge of honor, which it really isn't. It's just busyness, and it's the disconnection, and it leads to loneliness and the sadness. But it's fascinating how quickly you can get disconnected from your true five senses. Mm-hmm. And it's those little things that come back. I mean, I literally just did a Facebook post, and I get this is going to be a few weeks from now before people are going to hear this. But I was like, I'm sitting in my home office here, and I have a hummingbird feeder out there, and the windows were open this morning, and you can hear them literally chirping back and forth when they're fighting over who's going to feed, even though both of them could sit on there, or the fluttering of their wings. And it's like those simple little things like that, just like, oh, that's so beautiful.
It really is. And it's, how often do you take those moments? Again, that could have been 30 seconds, right? Before you sit down to do some work, to just listen, or to look around. It's so funny. I saw your post, by the way, and I was like, oh, I love that. And it made me think about, this morning, just kind of getting ready for this call and sitting in my bedroom and just looking around, at my space, and remembering that I went from, owning and living in a beautiful 3-bedroom home with a husband, to being divorced, living on my own in this beautiful 1-bedroom apartment that I created for me. And I just looked around and I thought, I love what I have created. I have created a space that feels so good to be in. I have little pops of color that look beautiful to me. I had quiet music playing in the background. I had my favorite candles lit, right? Like all of this, I just took a moment getting ready this morning and said, like, this is why I do this work.
Yeah.
Going through a pandemic and being single, like, there's a loneliness about that I have never experienced. And I have never felt more gratitude in solitude than I did this morning, because I was able to look around and go, I have created this little beautiful slice of life for myself. And it was not without struggle and pain and sorrow. So I encourage the women I work with to, how can you start to bring in those elements and surround yourself with them? So even in those quiet moments, at any given time, you can look around and say, my God, look at what I have created for myself.
Absolutely. And yes, there's so many different directions we could go with that. But it's fascinating, right? It's like just beginning to get curious again, like what we were talking about, like, how can I bring that in? And the gratitude practice literally is the neurological shift in the brain, the trench of that I don't have anything, to, oh my gosh, look how abundant I really am.
Totally.
Right. And it can be as simple as, if you've got little ones, and I know for some of my clients, they're just like, oh my gosh, it's kind of hectic with this pandemic and everybody being home all the time, and I don't have any space. It's like, sometimes being able, if you're able to step outside. If you can find a different room, go to the different room. Sometimes it may be just like checking in on your kids and listening to them breathe when they're sleeping.
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
itty bitty little things can start to shift from like, oh my gosh, I can't get away to, oh, whew, there's the peace again.
Right. Right. And I think again, it's just about moments, right?
Yeah.
It's about moments. It's giving yourself the grace to sink into a moment, just like there are moments of chaos.
Yeah.
There are also moments of peace and of stillness. And sometimes we have to create those. We can't just wait for them to pop in. We have to set little alarms on our phones of, all right, is the world literally going to, burst into flames if I take 30 seconds to close my eyes and just take some deep breaths? Like, absolutely not. But your nervous system sure is going to start to smooth out a little bit.
Yep.
And getting back into those moments of chaos is going to feel less chaotic to your nervous system. And us as women, especially HSPs, have to really, really take care and tend to our nervous systems, because guess what, sisters? No one else is going to.
They won't. They can't.
No, they can't. They can't, even if we wanted to, even if we begged them to.
Please, yeah. But I love just the practical part of that, the reminders on the phone. And I will say that to my clients as well. It's like, I forgot to go the restroom today. I forgot to eat lunch. And I know now that people are home, there's less forgetting because, again, there's less busyness in that way. And it's like, yeah, tune into your body, tune into what your nervous system is asking for right now. It could be as simple as closing your eyes. And it's like, it doesn't need to be a lot for you to start to reset where you are and what your body and your mind need in that moment.
Right. And sometimes we don't really know where to start. Mm-hmm. And so, I'll share with, the women that I work with, whether it's clinically or we're doing, women's gatherings that we do that aren't group therapy, but it's really process and connection. And I'll talk to them about, I do Reiki, and who here knows about Reiki? And half the time they're like, what in the world? And so I kind of share with them a little bit about what Reiki is, and then just walk them through, just allow yourself to feel this. You may feel nothing, who knows? But let's allow yourself to try something new. So I'm always encouraging women to look into, we have this amazing Google machine, like ways to get grounded, ways to create space, ways to create moments of flow and peace, and consider alternative outside modalities that maybe you would have never thought about, and bringing in someone who can help you with that, because we don't always have to be the only person that's a part of our process of slowing down.
Right. Well, Robin, I know you and I could talk about this truly, I think, for hours, because it's such a huge thing for the women that we work with, that disconnection, the feeling of loneliness and old things that need to be healed and moved through. And I've got to do it on my own. Because again, we both work with really strong women, which is beautiful. And it's okay to lean into that vulnerability too, because that's also part of your beautifulness. So ladies, I'm going to let you know, I'll have Robin's website. She's got two. One is the wildgracecollective.com, and that's for truly just for women. The other one is her couples and relationships counseling, which is the happycoupleexperts.com. I'll have that on the show notes along with her social media links as well. But she's got this beautiful gift where she will be offering mini distance Reiki healing treatments. For those of you who are part of my listener group, they're 15 minutes of deeply relaxing Reiki for $25, and they're normally $75 for 30 minutes. So as long as you let her know that you've listened to the Soul-Filled Sisterhood, I'll have a link for how you could schedule one of those sessions with her in the show notes as well. I just think Reiki is an incredible energy moving healing process. And I don't believe in just one way of doing things. It's all about the holistic stuff as well. So Robin, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today, for sharing your own journey of the shifting of your own female relationships that you have, and then the building up of this new sisterhood that you can lean into. And it's such a beautiful story, and how you also help other women find kind of their own tribe or what they need in their own personal life that helps fill them up. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing and for being on today.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for just giving me the opportunity to share the story. And my hope is, every woman listening to this kind of finds a piece of herself in this story, and and just is encouraged to connect with her fellow sisters, because we all are deeply wanting that connection. So thank you again.
To sign up for my workshop on the 5 shifts to end overwhelm and live a more balanced and connected life as a highly sensitive entrepreneur, go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/end overwhelm.